Hello, my loves. Continue to update new stories on Reddit, and don't forget if you like it, please subscribe and like it. Now let's start new stories. Story 1: Abusive parent, toxic family, and high expectations, which makes me suffer endless even after being miles away. Currently, I am a 21-year-old student. I had to think of a way to escape my father because the abuse had been going on for a long time and no one in my family knew about it. I decided to study abroad because I thought it was the only way to escape, even if only for a short time. This was a decision I regretted because I was struggling in the classes of a course I didn't like at all, archaeology, which is not popular in my country, and I had to convince my family to take it. Study abroad. My parents also expected me to be the best and smartest student in the class. Since I was little, they always wanted me to study well and be smart. If my scores were bad, they would repeat that over and over again, and even if I got good scores, they still saw that they weren't perfect. They compare me with my smart friends and say I'm lazy and useless. They also forced me to study what they wanted after class 10. When I finished my studies, they put me in an engineering field that I begged them not to choose. I failed my classes and kept it a secret until a professor told my dad everything. Things got worse and I had to beg them to let me study another major, and finally they agreed to let me study history. After a year, I endured in engineering. My grades dropped dramatically in 10th grade, which is when I realized I was being abused by my father. I hate it, I feel disgusting. I had to pretend everything was fine at school and at home. No one knew. I didn't dare tell my friends because I was afraid they would consider me dirty. I couldn't sleep without locking the door because I was afraid he would do something. I always have to keep an eye on where he is, or I will lose control for fear of what he will do when no one is there. I try to stay near or around other family members. I'm very afraid of him. Even now, I still feel like he is watching me and sometimes touching me even though I am thousands of miles away from him, which makes me always in a state of tension and unable to concentrate, happy or even relaxing. All my favorite things like books, reading time, and car rides were ruined because he did something there, and I felt like all the things I loved were tainted. Plus, my father has an influential job, so I couldn't seek help legally or from any organization back home. My family also moved many times, so I always had difficulty making friends. I rarely talk to others. To add salt to the wound, they let my younger brother do whatever he wanted. He played cricket and was very serious about it. They let him choose easy subjects for higher classes and the course he wanted for college, while I had to give up badminton, which I had played for 7 years in 10th standard. Because I'm not good at studying. I don't hate my younger brother because that's when family feels like real family, when I can play with him, talk about things we like, and simply be brothers with fun games and competitions. Argued, while my dad was terrible and my mom criticized my grades and weight, calling me lazy all the time. In February 2023, near the end of the final semester of my undergraduate history major, there was talk about studying abroad, and I jumped at the opportunity because I felt it was the only way I could escape from my father. They paid for my tuition and accommodation in the new country. But I feel useless here because I don't know what to study. I felt useless and stupid among other students, and I felt very bad. I sought out a mental health counselor in college because psychotherapy became accessible for the first time. I still endure it because I have to call my parents every day. They make me feel guilty every time, saying they paid a lot of money, should study hard, get a job, and my mother talked about marrying someone and I should finish my master's program and PhD before age 25. I just want to drop out of college and run away sometimes. All I want is a simple job, not a high-end job like my parents want. All my life I wanted a small job, small things, and a simple life. I feel like I made the stupidest decision to come here because I didn't know how to study or even get a job. I only had 1 year in this country, and I was always afraid that I would be sent home. I was tired and afraid that my father would find out I was failing my classes again. I can't go to class and face students and professors. Even though I've been here for 4 months, I still haven't made any friends. I do not know what to do. I can't live alone, have no job, no money, and no visa to do it. I want to stay in this country and try to get by, but I have no way to do that. How can I get away from my parents and only keep in touch with my younger brother? I'm afraid that if they find out, they'll do something to me, or they'll kick me out on the street and talk bad about me with my younger brother and other family members and friends. I can't tell anyone, that's why I'm venting here. Story 2. I, 30M, hit my father, 51M, for a past mistake. I am from Peru, from a provincial city. When I was 18 years old, my cousin, who is the same age as mine, accused me of having raped her. She and I were very close since we were children, since we used to spend time together. Due to family problems, she began to have depression. It wasn't like before. Now all she did was scream, get angry, or even blame me because I didn't have the same problems as her. The truth is, I was trying to help her, but my own mental health was beginning to deteriorate, so I decided little by little to move away. Months passed and I had no contact with her until one day my father came to my house and called me. I went out to meet him and he received me with a slap in the face. It should be noted that my father had never hit me before. Who did that was my mother, and only for specific reasons. When I asked him about the reason behind the hit, he slapped me again and told me to get out of the house, that his brother, my cousin's father, had told him that my cousin said that I raped her and that's why she was so depressed. Apparently her dad realized that she was cutting herself, and to get out of it she just blamed me for everything. My cousin didn't press charges, obviously because there is no proof. But still my dad told me that my uncle wanted to beat me up. My dad was disappointed in me. He hit me again, called me an abuser, insulted me, and told me to get out of his house. My mom was always a submissive person with him, so she didn't say anything to him. I simply, with my lip bleeding, grabbed my most valuable things and left. Thank God I had my savings on my card from what I had worked for, and I was able to go to the capital by public transportation. Once in the capital, I managed to rent a small room. I had a bad time for the next few years. I had a couple or two for a few years and jumping from job to survive. When I was 20 years old, my partner at that time told me that I could work at the KFC where she worked as a delivery order receptionist. The part-time job paid well, and with the bonuses you could even earn double or triple my salary, so I worked there doing the best I could while studying a technical degree in administration. Years passed and I ended up becoming a supervisor and then manager of that store thanks to my technical degree in business administration. At the age of 25, I became a partner with a former university classmate with whom I still had contact. She is a lawyer, and the age of 27 we got married. It was a small wedding because both she and I are modest with expenses and because I had no family to invite. We currently have a 1-year-old son whom I love with all my soul. It was after this that everything went to hell. Today in the middle of the afternoon there was a knock at my door. It was my parents. It had been more than a decade since I had seen them. I was frozen, but not with fear, but with anger. My dad asked me if he could come in. I told him no, so we talked in a nearby park. In short, they told me that my cousin had committed suicide and that in her letter she confessed the whole truth, that the person who actually abused her was her mother's brother, and that everything was orchestrated by him to be able to cover up and other things. The truth is, I was very indifferent. For me, whoever accuses of those crimes deserves to suffer them in flesh, so I didn't feel sorry for her. I told them kindly, and resisting my urge to yell at them, to go away and never contact me again, that they were dead to me. When I stood up from the bench to go home, my dad grabbed me by the shoulder. He told me that we have to keep talking. I told him no. He insisted. I told him no. He insisted again. So I turned around and instinctively gave him a hit. I don't know when my dad became so weak. Any Latino knows that countrymen are quite strong, but one hit was enough to break his nose. He stood stunned looking at me with his eyes open and his nose bleeding, and my mom was covering her mouth, for some reason that I don't explain. My next reaction was to throw myself at him. It wasn't difficult to knock him to the ground, and I continued hitting him. When he started to cover his face, I started hitting his head or forehead. I'll not lie, it felt liberating. I felt like I was crying while I hit him, and I continued until my right hand was hurting. My mother stood still. For some reason she didn't do anything. She just stood there watching and crying. By that time it was already night, and in our area it was difficult to find people on the street, even less so considering that today there is a soccer game. My mom helped my dad and took a taxi. She didn't say anything to me. She didn't scream. She just cried, and as soon as she grabbed my dad she ran away. I'm not lying. If she had tried to intervene, maybe she would have gotten the same treatment. A few hours later my mother writes to me on my cell phone. Apparently they contacted a friend from university. I still have my social networks active, who told them where I lived, saying that my father needs a septum reconstruction because it was perforated in dental reconstruction for having 4 broken teeth. Everything was going to cost the equivalent of $4,000, which is a lot of money here. Not a fortune, but it's a lot. I have already been clear with her. I am not going to put in a single cent. For my sake, she and my dad could end up just like my cousin. I don't care. She has been calling me, asking for forgiveness for everything, that she wants to come back into my life, that she was afraid and that she should have protected me or at least believed me. According to her, my dad felt the same, and according to him, he deserves every hit I gave him. I guess we agree on that. I told my wife everything. She already knew what happened in the past with my parents. She just told me that she understood, that, according to what I told her, my father died when he kicked me out of his house. So who did I hit was just a stranger with his face. I found her comparison funny and I agreed with her. She told me that if they tried legal measures we would simply say that it was in self-defense. A law was recently passed in which lethal force can even be used when it's about self-defense, so if something happens to him we can rely on that. Right now I'm glad I have a lawyer wife. I can't help but feel more liberated after this. My parents aren't poor, so I know they'll get the money for the operation. I hope they just aren't idiots enough to come back to my house. This is my home now, and if I have to beat them both to get the hell out of my life, I will. At the end of the day, they are the ones who started all this. I was just defending myself. I still feel a little euphoric and happy. The truth is, I am a little happy that they are suffering. They deserve it. I am happy with my life and my family, and I would protect them at any cost. That includes my parents. I needed to get this off my chest somehow, so I'm writing this to release it. Somehow telling it all has made me feel better. Story 3. My mom exploited me for almost 10 years. When I was 14, I went to live with my dad who lived in North Carolina. I would only visit him for summers, but one summer when I was 14, I got beat up by my mom over eating the last fruit snacks. She was having a hard time with her baby daddy in jail, and she, I guess, took it out on me. She kicked me in my stomach a few times, and the next day, I went to my therapist as usual and confessed. When I got in the car, the therapist told my mom, and she got pissed because Child Protective Services were involved now. She called my dad and told him to pick me up immediately. So, of course, he packed up his 2 kids and his wife and drove 10 hours from Charlotte, North Carolina to Detroit, Michigan. He had done this drive many times, so he could get there even faster now. My mom told my dad what happened and told him to keep me for the summer. My dad ignored that and took advantage of the situation. He took me to this place, which I'm guessing was where the social workers were, and had me repeat the story to them. The next thing I know, I'm in North Carolina longer than the summer, and I began to be homeschooled by my stepmom. My mom was pissed I didn't come back, but I thought it was the right thing to do so my mom's other kids wouldn't be caught up in the system. If I was gone, they should be safe, right? So I stayed and was homeschooled for my high school years. Since I wasn't up to speed on the grade level I should have been, my stepmom decided that I repeat my 9th grade with her again. Throughout that time of being homeschooled, she barely taught me. I feel she had the intention to but didn't. My brother, who was under 10 years, and I would sit in the apartment all the time doing nothing but watching TV and going to church events. She would have us go to this homeschool event for speech and debate, but it wasn't much. I didn't have any social life or friends. I didn't really see anyone or do anything unless it was people at church or church events. But I did tap into my creativity there. I was painting nice canvases, drawing more than I ever knew I could, and writing books that I eventually published years later when I was an adult. Anyways, I always felt as if my stepmom didn't like me. She always had comments like, "You remind me of your mother." At the time, I didn't know my mom had done really bad things to her, so as a kid, I was confused and felt odd. I eventually spoke up to my dad one day about it, and he didn't believe she wasn't teaching me. So one day, I got tired of feeling so left out of the family and called my mom and decided to run away. Basically, I took a Greyhound bus back to Detroit. I was 17. That was when I was in 11th grade. So I stayed there for 2 years for 9th and 10th grade. By the time summer was over, I felt a shock that I hadn't been to school in a few years, and I didn't pass or know anything. My stepmom made up transcripts to get me into my 11th grade classes. She made up 9th and 10th grade, so I was jumping into 11th grade lost. Then, I didn't know how to make friends. I was an easy target to get bullied for being weird. That's when I started to try to commit suicide. I wanted to be normal so bad, and I felt so weird not being normal that I got so depressed. I had a good 10 attempts and was hospitalized for each one. I struggled with passing my classes, got bullied by coaches and students, which made me suicidal and hospitalized. They falsely diagnosed me with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and a good 4 more mental disabilities. I was taking 10 to 15 pills per day, giving me bad side effects like drooling. I looked like a drug addict. I ended up going back to being homeschooled my last few months of high school and thankfully graduated. She didn't allow my dad to attend my graduation because she felt it was messed up what my stepmom did. My mom decided to put me in the system so she could be paid as a caregiver for me. I was fine, though. I wasn't truly sick, just depressed, so I never understood why she did that. Now, I'm on disability, and the state is paying for this company to fund her to take care of me. She put a guardian over me who was my aunt, and from there, she would get raises over the 9 years she worked for me as my caregiver. For 9 years, I would ask her every so often if I could work. She would tell me, let me figure it out and save. Keep in mind, she was getting paid well. She didn't give me any money, but she started to get greedy and wanted other people to work for me too, so she would hire my cousins and her boyfriends, and they would split the checks and give the other half to her. I never got a penny. By now, I was like 20 to 25 years old, and I never understood any of this. I just trusted my mama. I thought I was disabled by then and felt my purpose in life was to fund hers. She would call me high functioning and take me to workshops for people with disabilities. They would question me, thinking I worked there because I looked normal. I even had people tell me to do my job and change diapers. The workshop is a daycare for disabled adults. I didn't go often because I felt out of place. She would embarrass me and have my cousins pick me up like I truly wasn't stable. When she would allow me to work, it was at McDonald's, and it was only 2 hours a week through the workshop working program. She would make me take the city smart bus with old and disabled people, so I didn't want to continue. Keep in mind she was getting paid to take me places. When I had a job at 17, right before she put me on disability, I worked at Checkers, and they told me I was doing so well they wanted to hire me as a manager. She told them no because I needed to start my disability SSI check. Fast forward to me at 24. I just had no purpose, was still depressed, and felt my only reason for life was to help my mama babysit my baby brother and give her money. I eventually met my now fiancé on Snapchat. He eventually moved in with me because I ended up living alone in my mama's house as she moved to a nicer city. He helped me get out more, and I felt normal. I finally had a reason to live, and I wasn't as depressed. But she would make me want to fall backward when she would yell and be mad at me for not helping her clock in and out for her caregiving job. If I did it wrong, she would be pissed because she was outsmarting the system. I was supposed to have 24-hour care. She had my brother, who was 19, working as my caregiver too. So I had to clock in for both and keep up with not messing up. She would say she would go to jail if they caught us. Since I felt my life was for her, I would feel super depressed about messing up. One day after years of being suicidal-free, I tried it again with my fiancé present. He called my mama, and she told him she didn't care, she was on a date night. It was his job to take care of me now. After that, he stopped viewing her in a good light and started watching her actions. He would tell me, one day, I'm going to get you out of this situation. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought I was living a decent life. I thought the things I craved weren't real for me. To make the story shorter, years later, my mama forced me on a trip with her. I told her I only had $50, and she said that was fine, she'd pay for me there. Her plans on the trip didn't go as planned, so she asked me to get gas money. I told her I didn't want to because that was all my money. She got mad, tossed my phone, and started to beat me again, also throwing a chair over my back and head multiple times, repeating how she hates me and that I'm not her daughter. She went on with cruel, unnecessary words. Keep in mind, I hadn't said a thing or touched her. I was in shock. She then said she was going to call the police and lock me up in a mental hospital because I'm suicidal. I was confused, but I finally snapped out of it and realized she never had any pure intentions for me. She then said I needed to get out of her house when we got back home. So I called my fiancé, asked him to buy me a plane ticket, and I flew back home. I called my social worker and told her about the situation. I just left out the part where she was beating me because I didn't want her in trouble. My fiancé and I packed our bags with my dog and we began living homeless. In the process of 2 weeks living in the van, she called my doctors to try to get emergency custody over me and told everyone I was trying to kill myself and having a schizophrenic episode. Turns out, she didn't want me to leave her because she was not going to get paid. Story 4. Story about how I lived with a toxic family, I guess. Here's a story about my toxic foster parents and my narcissistic foster sister. Back when I was only 10 years old, my mother was struggling with life, so me and my 4 other siblings were put into foster care since my mother wasn't a good parent to take care of us. Each of us were placed in different homes. 2 of my sisters lived in one home together, the other 2 are split apart, and there is me, who lived alone with no siblings at all. Anyways, as I was saying, I was placed in a Christian home where I lived with a pastor and the First Lady and a girl named Destiny. Ever since I met them, I thought I would be treated well, but that's where I was wrong. You see, my foster parents were strict, and when I mean strict, I mean it. They didn't like that fact that I was drawing demonic stuff when I was only drawing silly, harmless cartoons. Back when I was 10, I was the type of kid who was obsessed with horror, video games, and of course drawing, but none of those stuff were welcomed in that house I was placed in. Sometimes I was called the devil for the art I drew, and it was at the point where they even threw away my childhood toys I had as a baby that I had brought to that house as a comfort to remember my family and mother. I was only 10. They ripped every picture I drew that were demonic. They even treated me like an outcast and treated Destiny like she was the best foster daughter in the world. Destiny had the same interest as I did, but she was never punished because she was God's child. Destiny had got many privileges than I did. She would set me up for stuff, manipulate me, sexually touched me, etc. She always wanted attention when really I was the one who needed love and support. To tell the truth, I was jealous of her. She always got what she wanted. She even destroyed my stuff and got away with it, and the best part is she's the reason why my art, my childhood toys were taken away from me. Home wasn't the only place she treated me like shit. At school, she would spread lies about me where at the point I wanted to commit suicide. She even hurt herself just so she could get me into serious trouble, and when I did, she would laugh and giggle to her friends about it the next day. She would tell the school I was a Satanist. Reminder, I'm not 10 at this time where she starts doing her bullshit. I'm 12 at that time. She also fought me countless times over stupid stuff, and when I would fight back, she would bring my foster mother in. Me, a 12-year-old girl thinking that my foster mom is gonna have my back and help me and defend me from destiny. No, none of that even happened. I was pinned to the floor by my foster mother while destiny beat on me. When she got finished, I would be locked in my room alone to cry in. I reported this to my social worker, but nothing was done about it. Now let's talk about my foster mother and father since I got the destiny stuff out of the way. My foster mother was the type of mother where she would dress you up into pink clothes, bows, and jewelry just for church just to make you seem like the cutest thing in the world. But my foster father was just a mean man who yelled at me and called me terrible stuff just 'cause I was demonic. But anyways, my foster mother would embarrass me in the church and tell everybody that there's a demon in the church and then points at me. Everyone would look at me with sadness or a shocked face. She would tell them that I would worship the devil in my art I drew. I still remember that day where she called me to the stage and yelled at me for the demon to come out. I would cry for them to stop, but nothing worked. Now you may think this is fake, but this is real. Real stuff that happened to me. But yeah, anyways, they would yell at me for like 2 minutes, and when they were done they would say, "The demon is gone, child." I would just stand there in fear while I cried because I didn't know what was going on. And then the next day at home I was claimed to have another demon in me. Thank God I'm out of that house now. I'm scared to go in churches now because of them. Story 5, Trapped in the Shadows. In the bustling city of Maplewood, behind the doors of a modest apartment, lived a woman named Emily. To the outside world, Emily appeared to have it all: a stable job, a comfortable home, and a charming husband named Mark. But behind closed doors, Emily's life was a nightmare. Mark was controlling and violent. What started as occasional harsh words soon escalated into frequent physical abuse. Emily was trapped in a cycle of fear and pain. She wanted to leave, but every time she gathered the courage to do so, Mark's threats and her own fears held her back. One night, after a particularly brutal attack, Emily sat on the bathroom floor, looking at her bruised reflection in the mirror. She felt utterly hopeless. She had no family nearby, and Mark had isolated her from her friends. She feared for her life and the repercussions of leaving. Mark had told her countless times, "If you ever try to leave me, you'll regret it." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Emily tried to hide her suffering, putting on a brave face at work and avoiding social interactions. But her colleague, Sarah, noticed the signs. One day, during lunch break, Sarah gently asked, "Emily, are you okay? You seem different lately." Emily hesitated, but the concern in Sarah's eyes gave her a glimmer of hope. She quietly whispered, "I'm not okay, Sarah. I don't know what to do." Sarah reached out and held Emily's hand. "You don't have to go through this alone. There are people who can help you." That evening, with Sarah's encouragement, Emily called the domestic violence hotline. She spoke to a counselor named Jane, who listened patiently as Emily poured out her heart. Jane provided Emily with resources and a plan to leave safely. The next few days were filled with careful planning. Emily gathered important documents, packed a small bag of essentials, and saved enough money for a cab fare. The night of her escape, Sarah waited outside Emily's apartment, ready to take her to a safe house. As Emily quietly left the apartment, her heart pounded with fear. She knew there was no turning back. When she reached Sarah's car, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. They drove to the safe house, where Emily was welcomed with warmth and compassion. The safe house provided Emily with a temporary place to stay, counseling, and legal assistance. With their support, she filed for a restraining order against Mark and started the process of divorce. The journey was not easy, and Emily faced many emotional and legal battles, but she was determined to reclaim her life. With time and therapy, Emily began to heal. She reconnected with her old friends, found solace in a support group, and even started a new hobby, painting. Her artwork became an outlet for her emotions, transforming her pain into beauty. Mark tried to contact her several times, but the restraining order and support from the safe house staff kept him at bay. Emily's confidence grew as she realized she was no longer a victim but a survivor. Years later, Emily stood in front of a group of women at a domestic violence awareness event. She shared her story, her voice steady and strong. "I was trapped in the shadows for so long, but I found the strength to break free. If I can do it, so can you." Her words resonated with many in the audience, inspiring hope and courage. Emily's journey from a life of abuse to one of empowerment became a beacon of hope for others facing similar struggles. She had learned that the chains of fear could be broken, and that every step toward freedom was a victory. And so, Emily's life, once filled with darkness, became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of hope. She knew that her story could help others find their way out of the shadows and into the light. Story 6: How Broken My Family Was. All started in 2001 when my parents got married and had my brother in 2003. My dad was a pretty big drinker back then, constantly going on solo and group trips where they drank and partied. My mom got tired of this because she wasn't getting any attention. By the time I was born in 2010, she threatened my dad with divorce if he didn't stop drinking and actually contribute to our upbringing. My dad agreed and stopped drinking and going on those trips entirely. Things were good then. He focused only on work and family. Fast forward to 2019, and my dad's business took a hit. My mom suddenly started getting mad because we were getting too close with our dad and kept calling him a drunk, even though he hadn't had a drink in the last 15 years. They started fighting frequently, and it obviously affected me a lot. Eventually, my dad just stopped talking to my mom and stayed home a lot more. So guess what? My mom needed someone else to take her frustration out on, and that meant she started taking it out on me and my brother. She became super irritable and critical of everything we did, no matter how small. The atmosphere at home turned toxic. My brother and I tried to stay out of her way, but her negativity was inescapable. I started feeling anxious all the time, constantly worrying about the next fight or what I might do to set her off. My grades started slipping, and concentrating on anything became impossible. My brother, being older, tried to shield me from the worst of it, but he had his own struggles to deal with. Things hit a breaking point in 2022 when my parents had a massive argument, and my dad moved out temporarily. During that time, my mom's anger only got worse, and she became even more demanding and critical. My brother and I felt like we were walking on eggshells every day. Eventually, my dad decided he couldn't stay away any longer and moved back in, trying to make things better, but the damage had already been done. My parents continued living together, but there was a noticeable rift between them. They barely spoke to each other, and when they did, it was often through gritted teeth. Seeing my parents like this was heartbreaking. I often found myself wishing for the days when things were good, even if just for a little while. My brother and I tried to support each other as much as we could, finding solace in our shared experiences. As I got older, I started to understand that my parents had their own issues they were struggling with, but it didn't make the situation any easier to bear. I began seeking help from friends and school counselors, trying to find ways to cope with the ongoing stress at home. In the end, I learned that sometimes, no matter how much you wish for things to get better, you have to take care of yourself first. My brother and I focused on our education and our future, hoping to break free from the cycle of negativity that had taken over our home. We knew our parents loved us, even if they didn't always show it in the best way, and we held on to the hope that one day, things might improve for all of us. Story 7. My family is the reason I died in the first place. I'm male 24 years old, have 3 younger siblings who are 21, 17, and 10 years old, plus my mom and dad. As the oldest, I was always independent and even moved out with 16, even though it is uncommon for my people. I am not the type to have nightmares since I never had them after a certain event, which is actually another good story. But basically, I was really tired today and somehow managed to sleep for a total 13 hours, which is a personal record for me. I usually sleep 4 to 5 hours. In my dream, it was a basic everyday setting at first. I was with my family and we were chilling. Which then changed 180 degrees after we all got the news on our phones saying that a zombie virus had spread to our country and the rest of the world. It also announced military law. So after the news, my parents and siblings didn't care for it and continued with what they were doing, while I was rushing my brainstorming to maximize our survival rate. I went ahead and closed all windows and doors to our apartment while looking outside and the news to check if the virus had reached us. And yes, I saw my neighbors getting hunted by the infected ones. I was telling everyone in my family to take this serious since this wasn't a joke and that the danger was real. I had started preparing to ration our food and made some weapons while telling everyone to realize what's going on and to not open any doors or windows. We were kinda safe since our apartment was on the second etage, which is too high for humans to climb and get in, but you can never be too cautious in that scenario. I know my parents and siblings would open the door for anyone ringing the bell, which is why I destroyed our bell that can open the door downstairs. I was kinda relieved when I saw them become aware and serious about the issue. But to my mistake, my mom opened the door to the balcony because our 2 cats were outside on the balcony. I had told them not to open the doors no matter what because I knew that our cats were on the balcony and got infected from a street cat that looked half dead and had no fur. I saw it bite my 2 cats. My family didn't know, nor did I want to know since we treated our cats as family members. I was heartbroken, but I could move on. My mom, though, saw them injured and didn't think of the possibility that they could be infected and let them in. For those who own cats, if your cat doesn't want you to see them, then you can't see or hear them come for you, since they are good at hunting. My cats thankfully didn't show signs of the virus infecting them yet, and I was able to put one of them back without any issues. but I was too late for the other one. They already transformed and attacked us. So I threw a blanket on it and tried my best to throw them out before it could infect us. I wasn't careful enough, but I had got bitten by it. I wasn't sure about what would happen to me, and I knew that waiting for it to happen would be worse since I don't want my family to be in danger. So I told them all to bond me to a chair as good as possible and told them to count the time since I was infected and record how I behave in that time, so that they could study and learn how the virus spreads. I didn't want to die since I knew it would cause great pain for my family and that without me their survival rate would decrease, since I was always the type to learn survival hacks and even had plans in case of an actual zombie apocalypse. So I told my lil brother, the one who is 17, to kill me as soon as I stop responding to them. I told them to cut off my head entirely to make sure I wouldn't rise from the dead. I told my family about the plan I had in this case. I told them to rush to the closest mountain you can get to and to only use roads with less traffic / more nature and far away from cities. I also told them that it's possible to cut off the infected body parts and to see if the virus gets a person. I told them to never trust other humans and that they are possibly worse than zombies. I told them to only carry what you really need, never separate, never follow any type of sounds you hear, to always follow their goal and to never stop only for gas or toilet. I told them much more, but I could hardly remember it all. I just know that in the end I told them that it's okay and that I am sorry for leaving you guys in this hell alone. I was crying as I told them I hope that they would forgive me, and when I said that I loved them and I wanted them to live for me too. I had noticed that while talking that my body was sweating and getting colder, while my skin got much paler. I was trying my best to tell my family everything I knew that would help them to survive while losing my sanity. In the end I said sorry, but it seems like the end for me while saying do it to my lil brother. I can just remember their crying faces telling my brother to stop. After that I woke up, not sweating or with an high pulse. I was just sad and felt the need to talk about it. Thank you for listening. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.